I am beginning to see a trend amongst car sharing hosts, and for hosts that fall victim to this, it's going to get messy very quickly. Now, as we know, car sharing is the business model of renting your car out to your peers in exchange for money. Think of it like an Airbnb, but for cars. One of the most common car sharing related questions that I get asked is regarding how to scale and start your Turo fleet. And that is the question of how do I buy more cars? Now, my business model is the cash car business model. I currently own 25 cars. All of them were purchased in cash and are owned outright. And whenever I buy new cars for my fleet, there are a few things that I like to keep in mind. Number one is reliability. Reliability is hands down one of the most important factors that you'll want to keep an eye out for whenever you buy cars. This is why I oftentimes avoid things like Chevy, Dodge, or BMW. I want to find cars that have a reliable reputation, but also ones that are relatively easy and cheap to fix. Secondly is depreciation. Depreciation is oftentimes a forgotten factor whenever you're a Turo host scaling quickly, but it's something that I keep top of mind all of the time. I want to buy cars that are at the lowest point in the depreciation curve. This means that whenever I buy a car, I want to be able to own it for a few years without it losing much of its value, if any at all. And last, but certainly not least, number three is I want to buy cars that are below market value. Now, regardless of what type of car I'm buying or the price point I'm paying for it, I want to make sure that I'm getting that car for a below market value deal. In my opinion, buying below market value is crucial to your long-term and overall success with car sharing. This business model has served me very well over the years, and while it certainly isn't the only way to grow a Turo fleet, it is the way that I have found a lot of success. I got to where I am today by growing slowly and strategically, and this can be a problem because it takes such a long time, and no one wants to wait years for their success, which I honestly can't blame them for. Because of this, today I see a lot of hosts taking a very different approach whenever it comes to growing their own fleet, and that is the approach of financing cars. Financing in and of itself isn't a bad thing. In fact, many people would argue that financing is the best route that you should take whenever you're growing a business. In fact, this is a long-held belief in the world of business, that you should use other people's money to grow your business, not your own money, which is where financing oftentimes comes into play. The problem though is that there is a right way to finance cars and there is a wrong way, and I'm beginning to see more and more car sharing hosts using the wrong way to grow their own fleets. And that is that these hosts are simply overpaying for the cars that they finance. You see, whenever you buy a car sharing vehicle and you list that car on Turo or GetAround, if you don't buy that car at the lowest point in its depreciation curve, the car will start losing value as soon as you purchase it and start renting it out. The car will accumulate mileage fast, the car will lose value from dents and dings, and the car will have more and more wear and tear. If you have a brand new car that you buy today, let's say for $40,000, there's a very high likelihood that that same car could be worth only $25,000 in 1 year. This becomes a huge issue when you go to sell the car, or in a worst case scenario, the car gets totaled. Since the beginning of the year, I've had nearly a dozen car sharing hosts reach out to me directly and tell me the same story. These car sharing hosts purchased cars in 2021 and in 2022. They overpaid for these cars, and as a result, these cars have now depreciated in value by 20 to 30%. And well, in the last couple of months, these cars have been totaled on Turo trips, and whenever Turo pays them out for the vehicle, they pay them out much less than what they paid for the cars. And in a worst case scenario, much less than what these hosts actually own on their car loans. And this leaves the hosts on the hook to pay the difference. And in the cases in which I have spoken to different hosts about this scenario, they've owed anywhere between $2,500 and $15,000 on a car that is now totaled. That is a ton of money being left on the table simply because depreciation wasn't properly being taken into account. And truthfully, this is a trend that I'm growing more and more concerned about, because over the last couple of years, Turo grew quite a lot. And during this period of time, a lot of new hosts joined the platform, and because of the state of the car market, they more than likely overpaid for their cars. And now as we sit here today in 2023, not only are we having to fight standard depreciation that comes along with buying a car, but we're also having to fight accelerated depreciation because of the crash of the car market. This is going to be a major problem, and here's what you can do in order to avoid any issues. First is don't overpay for cars ever. The purchase price of the vehicle that you buy for Turo is one of the most important decisions that you'll make with your Turo business. And it's a huge factor that's going to come into play later on down the road whenever you need to sell a car or whenever a car gets totaled. And while I know that many people out there don't want to buy cash cars like I do, the below market value methodology can be applied to any car that you want to buy. For example, back in 2021, I purchased a 2015 Maserati Ghibli, which I rented out on Turo. Turo. I purchased this car for $29,500. I had this car on Turo for about 6 months before it was totaled, and whenever it was totaled, I was actually paid out $33,000 for the car. I was not only able to make a profit on the vehicle while it was being listed out on Turo, but because of the fact that I paid a below market value price for the car when I purchased it, I was actually able to make money whenever the car was totaled. This can be applied to any vehicle, and it can really make you a ton of money in the long run. But more importantly, it can protect you from significant losses if something were to happen. The second tip that I have is don't buy new under any circumstances. It simply isn't worth it, and there is far too much downside whenever we talk about the financials of a new car. Now, I know that there are a lot of hosts out there that use gap coverage to cover the difference between their new car whenever they purchased it and the price of that car if it were to get totaled. But the reality is that gap coverage more often than not is personal coverage, especially if you purchase that car under your personal name. And it oftentimes is voided if that car is used for commercial use, which Turo is. So if that company was to find out that you were renting that car out on Turo and that is the circumstance of which the car was totaled, there is a high likelihood that this company could void gap coverage altogether, once again leaving you on the hook for the difference. Now, there is of course a chance that they simply wouldn't find out, but me personally, that's a risk that I wouldn't be willing to take. There are a lot of great slightly used cars out there that have already depreciated, that are already a great below market value deal, that in my opinion, buying new and paying an overpriced price for a car is never worth it, at least when we're talking about renting cars out on Turo. And last but certainly not least is if you are somebody that has auto loans associated with your Turo fleet, make sure that you aren't underwater on these loans. And if you are underwater on them, make sure that you have a plan in place in case something does go wrong. Either start paying down these loans a bit more aggressively, or alternatively start putting money aside. That way, if these cars do get totaled, or if you do need to sell them, you have a bit of a slush fund set aside to pay those loans if the time comes. The worst thing that can happen is a car getting totaled and you not having any extra funds to put towards the auto loan. On another note is the issue of financing Turo cars under your personal name and being 100% aware of what you're financially committing to. Recently, I took part in a Turo group call, and on this group call, there were a number of hosts who said that they had scaled their fleet through financing vehicles through their LLC, and they were under the impression that they had personally guaranteed this loan. In reality, they co-signed. There is a big difference between personally guaranteeing a loan and co-signing one. Whenever you personally guarantee a loan, you are basically saying, hey, if this person defaults on this loan, I will step in and I will make sure that this loan gets paid for. And whenever you personally guarantee something, that does not report onto your credit report, and thus it doesn't affect your credit score. But whenever you co-sign something, it is essentially making this exact same commitment, but it does report to your credit report, and thus it does affect your credit score. So co-signing can have some pretty significant ramifications whenever you compare it to personally guaranteeing. There are probably hundreds of different hosts out there throughout the country that have financed cars through their LLC, thinking that they personally guaranteed these loans, only to find out months later that they had actually co-signed on these loans. And let's say, for example, you were to co-sign 8 auto loans over the last year, this is going to have a significant impact on your personal credit and your ability to borrow money in the future. If you're somebody who wants to buy a car, buy a personal car, buy a house, you're not going to be able to do so if you've accidentally fallen into this co-signing trap. My advice to you is that if you are somebody who's going to finance a car, make sure that you do so and that you understand exactly what you're committing to. Make sure that you understand the role that you're playing and the role that your LLC is playing, and make sure to read all the paperwork thoroughly. I am such a proponent to Turo, and over the years, I've seen so many clever ways that people have used in order to grow their Turo fleets. But buying cars at an overinflated price and personally financing cars is, in my opinion, always a mistake. It's not worth sacrificing your personal credit or your personal financial future for short-term success, especially whenever that exact same success can be achieved a bit slower, but much more safer in other means. And if you are interested in pursuing these different paths, well, I have dozens of videos talking about it on my channel. But like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it. So make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. And I'll see you guys in the next video.